Hi, this is Lori Rehfeldt with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. And today I am with my colleague, my friend, my brother. He ain't heavy, he's my brother, George Conway. Welcome, George.
Thank you.
And now, here's something that a lot of folks don't know. A lot of folks don't know. And I did share this with Gary Hazeltine. So I know if he listens to this, I'm going to say, I told you to talk to him. Well, first of all, if George, can you give us a little bit of background about, why you came in the Air Force and what you were thinking or what you were hoping for?
Sure. Well, I joined in. That was my first duty assignment. I was 18 years old, and I joined. I wanted to travel and go to college, and I could do that joining the Air Force, going overseas as a policeman. Um, the My involvement isn't firsthand. I didn't see anything. I didn't even put the incident together with my experiences at the time until 14 years later in 94 when I seen a program on Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. And all of a sudden, there he was talking about the incident that I was present for, but had no idea what was going on, and didn't until I watched that program, and then I was able to put it together. So that by itself, that it was that hush hush of people that I actually knew that were reassigned to other flights, so there wouldn't be conversation. It was kept that tight, so I wasn't made aware that I was actually there and part of it until 1994.
Wow. So you were working on B flight, right? Bravo flight?
I I was switched right when this incident happened, and I think that was not a coincidence.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what happened with all the transfers is the folks that did have firsthand knowledge or talked to the people or heard the radio traffic were segregated from us folks that slept through it, had
hmm
no idea. What was amazing to me is how people I were friends with, I never spoke to again. It was like that. I was closer to the security police because when I first got to Bentwaters, I shared my first room in the barracks was with security, so I got to meet all those guys before I met any law enforcement
hmm
where I worked.
So you do you remember what flight? Because I know you were on Bravo flight, and then I
Yeah,
yeah,
I got moved to days. I got moved
to day shift. Okay.
to A. And here's what happened on my first day. This is my first day.
Yeah.
And there were two back-to-back incidents that until I seen this program and heard about, the Bentwaters was a thing, now sort of makes sense to me, the odd things that happen.
Yeah.
So the first one, if I can describe it, I was new on my job. First day on a flight, I go to the vehicle, I get my weapon, and I go to the vehicle, and John Burroughs is sitting in the driver's seat, and
Good.
that's not how you do it, as you know. Only
Yeah.
at the army. So I'm supposed to drop him off either in the barracks or at the bus stop. Well, he told me get in, so I'm like, wow, this is different. Maybe that's how a flight. I didn't know, and so we go out, and he crosses the runway.
Holy
He
shit.
over to where it happened across the runway. And I said, "Hey, I'm assigned to Bentwaters. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And he was so mum through the whole thing. He wanted to speak, but he didn't. And so finally, it was like, what the, and he finally said, "All I'm going to say is last night there were lights out here."
hmm
And he said that was it. That was all he told me. That was it. And so he
And you
asked
were
me,
over now. You were driving over to what? back gate through Woodbridge?
Yeah, he crossed the runway at Bentwaters, so the shortcut to the
Yeah,
Woodbridge the gate, and he asked me to stay in the car. It was a cold morning, I remember, but it was bright. It wasn't, it was morning.
yeah.
Dawn had broke. It was 8 o'clock or whatever, and I could still see him. And he walked into the edge of the woods, but I could still see him from where he parked on the you know uh, log road or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we were off the base. So that by itself, I'm like, what's he doing?
Yeah,
He's in
yeah.
a car that I'm assigned. So anyway, I I observed him uh, going really close up to trees.
Mhm.
2 or 3 different trees he examined, and he had gloves on. I remember he brought a camera, and he looked, like I'm like, what? That made no sense to me.
Yeah.
But that was very close to where the sighting was, and he wanted to find anything, a scrap of anything, evidence or whatever. So, gets back in the car, and I drive him back. So that was just weird. I never got anything else out of him regarding why he did that. And he was coming off the night of the second incident.
Okay.
So within minutes, then uh, I'm summoned to the flight line to escort Colonel Williams to his aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was this the same day?
it was the same morning.
Okay, same
It,
morning.
it
Okay.
was within a few minutes. And so my heart's pounding. I'm like, Colonel Williams, he's not the base commander. He's the wing commander.
Yeah,
He's in
yeah.
thing. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do what they said. So he has a driver, that takes him everywhere, but they called me. And I believe it's because I knew nothing, and
Yeah,
that's what they
yeah.
wanted. Didn't want any uncomfortable questions or whatever. And so he gets in, and he has some a big, tall dude, like over 6 feet. And he had a
Mm-hmm.
satchel. I remember he had a satchel. And when he got back in the back, he opened it, and I could see that he was looking at, whatever it was. And then he caught me in the mirror looking at him, and he didn't say anything, but he looked at me like,
Yeah,
turn around,
yeah.
So so that made me curious. So when I did stop to let him
But
out,
you said it was like a canister, right?
well, no, wait, I'm telling. So this
Okay.
is I didn't get a good look then, but when he put it away to get out of the car, I got a good look at it, and I found it online, something real similar, a military, um, I don't know what you call it, like a thick thermos,
Mm-hmm.
but it was crash proof, fireproof. It could survive a plane crash,
Yeah,
and Gary and I later on figured out that was probably film because
yeah.
they'd already transported the 35 millimeter. So that was the videotape. I meant to say videotape. Um, so that was it. Those were the two curious things. I didn't really think that much more about him. There was one other incident and I don't know how many days it was after that. I lived off base, but after shift I would just sometimes go to the barracks, see what's going on. And I remember I went there, and all the security guys were in one room. There was a dozen, not that many, 7 or 8 guys in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and they were teasing somebody so bad that this kid ran out and he went into the bathroom. And I heard him making the noises, like Twilight Zone, doo, 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 and they were
Okay.
really embarrassing this kid.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I took his photograph. I took a picture of him at the sink, and it was Larry. It turned out it was Larry Warren. They were, I don't
Wow.
know. And here's the thing: some of those guys I knew, and this conversation would just stop when I'd come into some of their rooms. And these are guys, I chat with. What are we doing tonight?
Yeah.
Nothing. Them guys I never spoke with again. And it doesn't help that happened because now I can't give you the names of the guys because from that point it's just like you got on a new shift. We don't talk anymore. It was weird. It was really weird.
Yeah.
So it was just circumstantial things for me. I didn't see any lights, but I seen some bizarre behavior that after I learned more about what went on sort of fits,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh,
in this-
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what's really important is that because everyone heard about Captain Verano was the one who went to the aircraft to give him the film, but that was a separate incident. where I don't think
Later, the captain, who by the way sort of resembles me, so
mm-hmm.
somebody could have been confused or whatever, but
Oh, okay.
he later admitted to taking 2 trips. And I think he did because he knew that I knew there was more than one trip. But,
Oh.
or there were 3. All I know is I made one trip with him. And it was
Mm-hmm.
only, we drove maybe 2 football fields it wasn't far. I don't know
Yeah.
why, I know they chose me because I didn't know nothing. That's what I assumed later on.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And they kind of figured you keep quiet, if they.
Yeah, that I wouldn't be curious or I wouldn't go back and say, hey, where was the colonel going? And he had
Yeah.
this weird thing. No, I didn't put any of that together till
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah. Well, what was really strange is when I was on, after I left B flight, it wasn't long after I was on Bravo flight. It was probably about the time when we did that Sparrowhawk. Remember
The what?
that? Remember we did Sparrowhawk? It was an
Oh, yeah,
exercise.
vaguely. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And Rudy got drunk. No, I'm kidding. No, he did get drunk. But I just really think that some of these pieces to the puzzle are just really, really important that a lot of people know about. But what I was going to say was that my sighting actually occurred right after I left Bravo flight and went on to Delta flight. And it was just so surreal because we had to report it, mainly because the damn thing flew over the base and it flew low. It was maybe about 50 feet off the ground. And I was feeling so beaten up by the way I was treated during my 2 years there that I didn't want to report it. I was, man, I don't. But I did. And I remember I took a lot of heat for that. But it was funny is that no one had to go and chase after me to say, Rehfeldt, shut up, you can't talk about this, and do all this other stuff because maybe they figured out already that I was pretty much feeling like I was low crawling my way in and out of the base.
You were by yourself too, right?
No, I was on patrol with Airman Keith Duffield. So no, I had somebody to corroborate what I was seeing. And yeah, we were tossing the radio back and forth between us, saying, "No, you got to report it. You're the lead patrol." And he's like, "No, you are the lead patrol." Yeah, and I even remember the desk sergeant, Alan Cohen, was on the desk at the time.
Don't remember
And
Cohen.
at that time, he didn't like me very much. It was like he'd make fun of me and that kind of thing. So it was kind of like that sing-song voice, like, okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
Lori's
Oh,
seeing.
your sighting was prior to the Rendlesham.
Yeah, yeah.
How many months?
Mine was in February, so it was about 9 months, something like that. And
Okay.
the one, and interestingly, is because I had extended. See, I got to Bentwaters in May of 1978. So I think I got there maybe about a year before you did. And so when I actually extended a year, and then I curtailed it. I stayed there for a year because I was dating this guy and I wanted to stay there. And then we broke up. And then I was like, hell with this. I want to get out of here now. So I ended up leaving in December 15th, 1980. So I
just
missed, yeah. So I missed the whole. I was in New York celebrating the fact that John Lennon had died and celebrating Christmas.
That's
Well,
right.
I wasn't celebrating that he died. I was kind of grieving. But, and it took, for me, it was probably about 95 or 96 when I learned about that it came back. And I didn't see any of the TV shows. I just so happened to get internet at my computer
How
at
did
work.
they keep quiet for 14? You know what I mean? That alone is amazing to me.
Yeah. Well, the funny part about it felt like an awakening too. It felt like, and all of a sudden, all these people were coming out of the woodwork that, I thought I'd never see again. It's like you say goodbye, and it was really a goodbye because, what was the likelihood that you'd run into these people? And so the first thing I saw was that this guy wrote this book called Left at East Gate, and
Mhm.
that turned out to be Larry Warren. So he was the first person I talked to about it. And, I believed him 100%. I mean, I listened
Did he
to it.
have a mustache back in the day? Did he sport a mustache?
Yeah, yeah. And
That's a I was so curious as to why are they picking on this guy and making weird, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Now
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Well, apparently, I mean, they if you get a chance, read his book. It's really good.
I read that book.
What's that?
I've read that book. I read
Yeah,
that book.
yeah. I mean,
But the other part, I know nothing about, the physical,
mhm,
where he was with them and stuff like that. Now, the other account is pretty easy to believe, where Jim and John walked
mhm.
up on it, things they did.
Well,
Gary,
the interesting thing about that too is that even though they were together, their realities were completely different. And
yeah,
which could actually lead you to say, well, he wasn't paying attention, or we should be gathering the same kind of data. But the reality is that there must have been like a mind shift going on because apparently they said John Burroughs, based on a few people who were near him, kind of faded. And he kind of disappeared.
well, what's weird is, like, I've told this story now several times, but when people tell John what I've said, John don't remember it at all. And I get that. He had a lot going on. But it's
Yeah,
like I'm not saying anything,
no,
that's different than his story, but
yeah,
um
yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is that um, he was on Charlie flight, so it was so funny. That was probably the only flight of people I really never got to know that well.
yeah, I
Um,
didn't
I don't know if
and
because it was always the opposite, or they were off duty when we were on, or something. Um, but it could have been too that I think on the second day, technically he was really, I think he was off work. So he should have been on his break,
No,
unless
he
he.
went back out there that day. I found out
What's
later.
that?
He was off that day and he went back out to where he had me
Yeah,
drive him.
yeah, yeah.
He
Was
didn't
he?
go to bed.
Do you remember? Was he wearing civilian clothes, or was he in the
Oh, I'm
uniform?
sure he did, because I can't remember if I took him to the bus stop or the barracks, but I think he lived off base at the time.
Yeah, he
But
did. Yeah,
I think he went to a friend's in the barracks and changed and went back out to investigate.
yeah.
Because
Well, that makes sense. Well, he.
it was like he seen a ghost. It was really like that, where he was adamant about not saying anything to me. So I think he'd already been read the riot act about that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it?
But he came forward, but he's like there's just a handful of guys, but there was a couple dozen that
Yeah,
had to have give a firsthand account, you
yeah.
know.
Apparently, I was talking to Dale Combs has been wanting to reach out to Bud Steffens, who I think was I think he must have been security side on
40
the
years.
DoD flight. What's that?
I said those names after 40 years. When I spoke to Dale, he completely shot it down. He didn't want to even really talk about it the way he
Yeah,
asked my questions. When I asked him about it, he just boom. It was like
yeah,
he knew
yeah,
something or he wasn't going to say anything. One of the two.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
imagine he didn't know something because he was a tech sergeant at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that whole thing, I guess it's easier to deal with the low-hanging apples when, if something is
Yeah.
tangible, or you can see something and experience it with your senses. But it comes down to what happens when your senses aren't going to show you what you think you're seeing. I mean, I think a lot of what happened, I think when you put all the pieces together, we all had very, very similar. There were very similar patterns to what happened. My when mine flew, it came in from the North Sea, and at first I thought it was a cargo plane. I mean, I thought it was a big plane, and I was looking at, well, I guess it's coming from Germany, I guess, so maybe I got to do a customs check, So I'm thinking about, I wonder if I have all the forms I need to do that, And then when it stopped at the edge of the runway, and this is Woodbridge, and then it made these geometric movements, like up, down, left, right, before it kind of burst into three pieces and did this low arc and then shot straight up into the sky. And it didn't make any mechanical sound.
The tower, see it?
What's that?
The tower, the people in the tower.
Well, it's funny. I went to the tower and woke the guy up. I know. I was so angry. I was so angry at it. And then the guy in the tower said, "Well, it could have been afterburners from a British aircraft." And I said to him, I just walked out there stunned, and I remember staring out toward the North Sea thinking, afterburners. I'm thinking, no, isn't there usually a sonic boom that goes with that?
Yeah, don't explain stopping and all that.
Yeah, this didn't make any noise at all. And I was just so, I ended up, I was just so disappointed too, because it would have really been nice if it did, if I did have proof.
That could have been the mother of those little guys that landed, those little Delta triangles.
Mm-hmm.
Could that have been the aircraft carrier for them or whatever?
The aircraft?
Was it that big that it could have been like a mother ship?
Well, the original one was really big. I mean, then it broke into three pieces, became three smaller
crazy.
And then and I mean it flew up into the night sky. I mean, I was looking out my window because I had positioned my truck beside East Gate, facing off base, because I had just checked the back gate to make sure it was locked. And then it happened, and we were just
in the newspaper or nothing, right?
Nothing. And then a few years ago, this guy actually created a short clip called "Mystery at East Gate," so you could actually see what I described. It's pretty interesting. But
I've got
interesting though. Listen, if I had talked to you back between February and December, and I don't think we did, but because at that point I was working on A flight. Maybe that's why you took over maybe my position, being on A flight, which meant you were a gate guard all the time. But when I was if I had talked to you, you probably would not have known about what I saw, because I just knew, I just felt threatened. Like I knew if I pursued it, I would have been railroaded out. They would have snapped me.
I didn't arrive there till November of '79.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, but I don't remember you ever saying anything to me about it.
No.
At the time, we talked about it later.
Yeah. No, because I just didn't see the value in it at the time. I mean, who is going to?
And I still remember how they were rough with you. Even that Cohen, the staff sergeant, whatever he was,
Yeah. Interestingly, he actually apologized to me later on and said, we should go out to lunch sometime. I think he's in Iowa or someplace. But I thought that was really nice that he,
yeah, that's cool.
That he, he's a grown-up man, and he realized what he did was wrong, and I accepted his apology, which I think, I just.
I got something I want to share with you, not to get off subject, but
no.
The more I think of this, and then hear about the other military sightings,
mm-hmm.
and those seem to have more credibility because the people aren't, they didn't see it from the bar parking lot or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what the thread I see on a few of them is it seems almost like it's a survey, like they're going to where they think or know there are nuclear weapons, and they do a count and
Mhm.
and things like that. Or who knows, maybe they diffuse them, which would be great. But I learned, and I don't know why I didn't learn this earlier, that the Enola Gay, the B-29 that dropped the
Mhm.
bomb in
Yeah.
Hiroshima, you know where it ended up when it left Asia, where it was stationed?
No.
Roswell,
Oh,
Roswell, New Mexico. And within months, they had the incident. So again, maybe they were thinking that was the source of
mhm.
this nuclear material. So who knows? But I thought that was weird that it was Roswell right around the same time of the incident. The incident happened a few months after the plane
Mhm.
came back.
Yeah.
But that's kind of queer, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. The other thing that I noticed is that every assignment I went to after I left England, I was near something that they were either doing some kind of like R&D, research and development stuff. That there was something going on. I left. I went to Lowry, and um, then I went to Nellis. But when I went to Nellis, I was actually stationed on the ranges. I wasn't in security police anymore, and I was pretty close to area. What's it? 52, 53,
51.
51. Thank you. You could say I'm really committed to this whole thing. But it was always like, where's Waldo? It's like, where's Lori? Not too far from Area 51. Spent a lot of time and had some really kind of strange experiences. I did pass through, but wasn't stationed there. Was at oh that base in, I think it's in Ohio. Um,
We don't have any bases in Iowa.
no, Ohio. Like, I'm trying to think of the name. Wright Patterson. Yeah.
Yep, it's
Yeah,
in Ohio.
yeah, and they probably have some crazy stuff going on there. And same at Fort Belvoir, they had a big R&D thing with it's just like all these places there. There's a lot of
I
crazy
don't know.
stuff.
I bet a lot of stuff's going on in the bases. We don't have a clue. We don't know about it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
They could be doing experiments. Who knows? We're just checking if the building's
yeah,
locked at night.
yeah. I know, really. But I actually had I actually had experience once when I was in the bomb dump over at Woodbridge, where um, it was it was about just after midnight, and I was getting ready to do my building checks, and I have my M16 over my shoulder, and I walk away from the gate shack, and then all of a sudden I see this flash in my head of this praying mantis, like 7 feet tall, really dark, and he said, "Don't go." And I went about face and went back to my gate shack. And I said, I'm not leaving this gate shack until
Halloween?
daybreak. Hmm?
Was it Halloween?
Nope, 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 nope. But whatever it was. And then I was talking to somebody.
It could have been Headless Charlie.
Oh, man.
Remember him?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would have been. Yeah. And, and I just think that I talked to other people that have been doing a lot of research on these places, and they'll say, "Yeah, yes, other people have said that they've experienced it with the grays and the mantids and all these other things." It's like, well, why didn't Yeah, people told us about Easton Charlie, but what about all this other stuff going on? So I do believe that there was a lot of stuff going on, more so than most people would even want to. I mean, we all
Yeah.
kind of laughed at it, like, because we don't want to believe that stuff.
But I think that reason, those world-ending weapons that we have, I think if they're advanced and they know about them, they'd want to survey them, check on, you know what I mean? And that's why they returned. They were
Yeah.
there when you seen them. They were there again in December and doing their survey.
Hi.
This is Lori Rehfeldt, and I had just recently done a podcast with George Conway. George was someone that I knew at RAF Bentwaters, and I found that his story really, to me, opens up an element that we've skipped around. We haven't really talked about. In the sense of really examining the aspects of silence or silence under duress, even though it had really nothing to do with communication security in the sense of something that was top secret. And one of the things that I found, and I took the cover off a long time ago, as you can see, it's pretty battered, but this left that escaped. And there are elements of it that, I mean, I've read this book several times over, and sometimes I still see something new. And I'm not saying it's like the Bible, but it's probably more interesting. It's chapter 4, just want to share this, Home of the Brave. The first thing he wrote, and you can't deny this guy, Larry Warren, is highly intuitive, and he's figured out all the different layers. And when I was talking with George, George was even saying that he remembered Larry Warren back then and remembered how some of the airmen in the dormitory were mistreating him. And what he actually did a quote from John Lennon. Now get this, think about it, really. A conspiracy of silence speaks louder than words. Now, underneath that, there's a letter that we all got. It's a letter from Malcolm S. Ziegler, Major USAF, talking about welcome to Bentwaters, and it just gives you an idea of welcome and have a pleasant trip, and I'll meet you when you arrive. And he was sincerely. So, you listen to those types of words, sincerely, and you think, okay, well, this sounds like somebody who's really going to care about me, who's going to have my back. So, at least that's what I thought when I got the letter. Now, the one thing that I found interesting after that had to do with the actual, not the incident per se, but what happened after the incident. The day after, so I'm going to take off my hat here, excuse the cowlick or what's going on with my hair. That's okay. This is chapter 2. It was called The Next Day. So this is after the events that Larry Warren on Delta flight, not Charlie flight, which is where Burroughs and Jim Peniston were. The following day, after seeing these, it was several things going on. I mean, whether it was the atmosphere, the lights, a lot of confusion out there in the woods during the evening. And so how do you process all that? I mean, truly, how do you process it? I'm asking the audience here. And you're brand new to RAF Bentwaters. This is the end of December. Larry Warren got there December 1st. Did not know the lay of the land. Did not know that they were really serious when they said things like, don't talk, let it go. And it really bothers me that truly no one in the hierarchy had his back, period, and several others, but and he brings that up too. And so he wrote that he emerged from the dorm building, not knowing what to expect, feeling like a survivor of a nuclear holocaust, leaving his shelter for the first time. When I left England, that's how I felt. I was a survivor. I was not, oh yeah, we're done with that tour, let's go on to the next one. And I never wanted to go back. I was counting my days down. So when Larry met me on December 1st, when he first got there, I happened to be on the main gate near the base exchange, which is the main gate. And so it was 7:30 a.m. The sun had a calming effect on me. I still felt a bit sick and dizzy. I saw people around me beginning their day as usual, but felt strangely removed from the rest of the world. And then he goes on saying that this can't be real, no way. Countless emotions welled up inside, the base now taken on an ominous look. He actually mentioned, even way before this, he talked about when he got to Bentwaters that there was something wrong with the base as soon as he got there. Yes, here it is. This is on page 26 of Lost Eddie's Gate. And he said, I'd arrived at RAF Bentwaters and didn't know what to feel or expect. There was something about the place I still can't pinpoint, something just not right about the area. I felt it the first day in 1980, December 1st, but brushed it away as fast as I could. You know, he did, and I did. It was the same thing. It's like something's wrong. I mean, for me, I could actually feel the pressure on the whatever was the atmosphere. It was almost like the gravity in the area. There was something completely wrong with the place. But you know, you get to a base and it's your first time there, and you're thinking, well, what that, you know, you're trying to get the lay of the land. I mean, even on the first day, and you're exhausted because you just got off of a flight from McGuire Air Force Base to Mildenhall, and then you took this long trip on one of the luxury buses. You know, it's funny because he was only there for barely 6 months that he had experienced so much, and the fact that they were trying their best to shut him up. And this really relates to George's experience, because he was sleeping, and when he woke up, he knew something had gone on, but no one was talking. So inside the mess hall, it was business as usual. The morning breakfast club at RAF Bentwaters was in full swing. I scanned the room at the SP table off to my left. Almost segregated from the rest of the dining area were 10 or so cops. The gun racks were half full with M16s, and some guys from A Flight seemed uncomfortable. Most of the cops at the table were from D Flight, Delta Flight. They were from D Flight. The haunted look on their faces told everyone they did not want to be bothered. And so I slid my tray along the steel and glass, filled a plate with food I knew I wouldn't eat, then made my way to the SP table. I could hear the buzz. Everybody I passed seemed to be talking about the UFO incident. Versions of the story ranged from the ridiculous to the mundane. The rumors had begun. I sat down at the table. Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston and a few others were there. They knew what had happened. Some guys talked about anything else that came to mind, but I had an overwhelming need to talk about the UFO. What happened to us in the forest? Yeah, I mean, that's a simple question. What happened? What did we experience? Is this normal? Is this something that happens from time to time? Can we go back? Can somebody explain the nature of the place, or why is it that people have had different feelings, different realities, different perspectives? I mean, it's really quite it's really frightening, actually. And excuse me, I have a cat that's near me that wants attention. So out of the blue, Steve Longero leaned over and asked me if the last 24 hours had been a dream. I smiled and shook my head, not really knowing for sure. Suddenly, the few A-flight cops at the table let loose with the question, was it really a UFO? What did the aliens look like? I was responding as quickly as I could when Peniston looked in my direction and said, "Hey, Warren, shut the fuck up." That was nice. "Jim, I'm sorry. That was rude. And you experienced something completely different. But what were you telling him to shut up when nobody else at this point told anyone to shut up?" So, I mean, Larry didn't know that, you got to put a lid on it. And here's the thing, too, is that Jim Peniston was working Charlie flight. And I don't know, I can't remember offhand if Delta flight is now working the midnight shift, then I don't know if Charlie flight was now working swings or if they were on break. I think they were on break, Charlie flight, and I think Bravo flight was on swing shift. So, and that was a flight technically that George Conway was on, Bravo flight. And apparently he got notice that he was being moved without explanation to A flight, which is the day shift. But it was interesting that out of all the airmen and sergeants out there, how Larry Warren and like a handful of them have always been interconnected. And, I mean, the odds of Charlie flight NCO who lived off base, sitting at the breakfast table with the rest of the guys who were, they had a meal card, so they couldn't eat off base anyway. But as an NCO, you were given extra money to live off base so you can eat at home or eat out or pay extra money to eat in the chow hall. But my point again is that what was Jim doing at the table? I mean, you got Delta flight people, Alpha flight people, and you got Jim Peniston from Charlie flight. And I'm not saying that Jim shouldn't have been there. I mean, he wanted to be there. I mean, that's fine. It just seems kind of odd a little bit. But at that point, to be told in such a way, "Hey, Warren, shut the fuck up," that it was humiliating for Larry. It would be humiliating for me. I mean, somebody's asking a question, I'm answering a question, and now I'm being yelled at because I'm answering a question and no one told me I wasn't supposed to ask these questions or answer them. So anyway, Larry had the urge to throw my tray at him. Pushing it away, I stood up to leave and headed for the door. I wondered what Peniston knew that I didn't. I resented him for silencing me. The cover-up was already beginning. Yeah, definitely. He walked back to the SP dorm, meaning Larry, the SP dorm, feeling an overwhelming need to talk about what I'd seen. Now, it's the first time you're on flight, you're out of tech school, first time on flight, you see this extraordinary thing. You're 18 years old. You're not told anything. You're not given any instruction of what to do with the information. That I think it was healthy that he wanted to get to the answers, find out what was going on. If anyone knew, I mean, maybe no one knew. You know, it could have been a bunch of things. So he tried to get his mind off of it, and he was playing his guitar, practicing, listening to Eric Clapton's album, and played Blues Power. You know, just trying to distract himself, even though technically it was probably been up over 24 hours now, and he should be asleep. And the door to his room opened, and Art Henderson entered. Looking a little worried, he waved a handwritten message in my face. And pretty much what it said was that the note said I was to be at the law enforcement desk at 11 a.m. sharp in uniform. The time at this point was nearly 10 a.m. So he got into his uniform, and he didn't have a car. And the law enforcement desk was on the other side of the base. So it could take about 15, 20 minutes to get there, depending. I mean, you definitely had to do a little bit of running and moving quickly. And, you know, it takes time to get into your uniform with the boots, you know, having to lace up the boots and all that stuff. So he moved as fast as he could, because he really wanted, like most people, you're brand new at the base, you want to make a good impression, and you want to put your best foot forward. So he went past the post 10, which was the main gate out on the work side. We called it the technical side, tech side of the base. That's where the aircraft were. And in front of the drab green building, which was the law enforcement desk or law enforcement building, at least 12 people were standing in a group. I recognized Major Ziegler first. The majority were like myself, airmen below the rank of sergeant. All had seen the UFO. I was late. As I joined the ranks, Major Ziegler asked if I had a habit of being late for appointments. And he said, "No, sir." You know, so he's trying to do it right. You know, he could have said, if he was civilian, he could have said, "Hey, look, I just got the note." Because we didn't have cell phones. There was only one phone near the day room. And I believe, I don't know if there was a day room on every floor. I think they had to go down to the second floor. So if you were on the first floor or the third floor, you had to go down one level where the day room is, and there's a phone right beside it. So anyway, that to me is that Major Ziegler was being obnoxious. So then he turned to the rest of them and told us that we were going to be debriefed concerning what we had experienced in Rendlesham Forest. First and foremost, we were to give our full cooperation to the debriefers. After the major walked away, a tech sergeant from disaster preparedness walked around us holding a Geiger counter. And I don't know if we made the device react, but one airman did seem to cause some interest. He took out what seemed to be a small rock out of his jacket pocket and showed it to the tech sergeant. And the tech sergeant placed it in a plastic bag and dropped it in a metal box next to the building. I noticed two nice cars with government plates parked across the street. The front door of the law enforcement desk opened, and the assistant chief of security police, Major Drury, motioned us inside. We were all quiet. The office was strangely void of personnel, only an airman operating the law enforcement communications console. And we faced a long counter, which is actually on the opposite wall. When you walked up to the law enforcement desk, or when you first walk in the building, there's this really disgusting bathroom. And then you make a left turn. The first room over is just a room where you can do interrogations and that kind of thing. And then, but if you keep going down this short hall, to the right was this table that was a counter that was attached to the wall that was opposite where the desk sergeant sat. So I don't know if we made the device. Oh, we did that part. Wow. We faced a long counter on which numerous documents were arranged in stacks, one for each of us. I tried to scan them, but they were too much to absorb. A staff sergeant named Jackson, whom I recognized from the AF Office of Special Investigation, AFOSI, told us to sign our names at the bottom of each document and not to forget to write our social security numbers under our names. Someone asked if we could read the documents we were signing. Major Drury told them we could read them later. There wasn't any time now. Now, there probably wasn't any time because they had to go in this room where they had these people that were from, one was from the Joint Army Navy, was from, one of the guys was a naval officer, Commander Richardson from the Office of Naval Intelligence based in London. So, so they were giving these stacks of documents to read and sign, but they were told not to read it. You can read it later. That's like putting the horse before the cart. If you're going to have people sign something and it's a statement that somebody's saying that you've got to do this, you want to read it if you're putting your name on it, if you're signing it. But the fact that the guy was a major and everybody else were airmen, you're scared. You're like, oh, well, I better do what the major wants or else he's going to be pissed off at me. But there are 2 pages that were stapled together, stood apart from the others. As I read them, I got mad. The document was a typed statement as to what each of us had seen in the forest. Each statement was the same, a whitewash of what we had witnessed the night before. It stated that we had only seen some unusual lights in the trees and nothing more. I couldn't believe it. An airman named Russell protested the contents of the statement, saying it was not accurate. We were told to sign them and go into Major Ziegler's office. Now that really bothers me because, here we're taught to have integrity, to be honest, to do the right thing. But when it really came down to it, they wanted you to whitewash it, like you said, or just, make it seem something that it wasn't. And the question is, why? Why would you do that? I mean, what's the purpose? What's the motivation? What would happen if these young people wrote what they had seen or what they had experienced, and what would happen if it got out in public? I mean, they could still be told that what they saw or what happened it's all in their mind. I mean, but this is where it started to turn into a war on what was right versus what is wrong. And at this point, when you've got the highest ranking people of the 81st Security Police Squadron saying, I want you to lie. I don't care, lie. And you're not going to talk about this, even though you really don't know what you saw or what you experienced. But if Larry had been there longer, if he had been there a year or so longer, believe me, because when I first got there, I kind of complained vocally about things, and it took a little while before I got in the groove and realized that, Lori, your best bet is to shut up. But when you first get to the base and you see something, I mean, you don't know the unspoken rules that you have to follow. The unspoken rules are: do not complain, do as you're being told to do, shut up. But when you're new, I mean, I would have pursued it too, but when you've been there for a while, at Bentwaters, you're beaten down. You're beaten down to the point that really you don't really care. I mean, it's to the point of, is the aggravation worth it? What is the benefit that I'm going to get out of this by pursuing it? And which really, even to this day, makes me angry, because I just feel like that is so wrong. So they go into this room, and this commander and another guy, looks like he's from Office of Special Investigations, decides to let them know, show them a bunch of film clips that shows that, yes, there is numerous civilizations that visit this planet from time to time. And here's a bunch of videos that go back to World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. And so, so they're watching these films. And at one point, as amazing as it was, he seemed quite comfortable with what he was telling us. I had the impression he was giving us a lot of information and very little hardcore fact, nothing we could quote with much confidence or accuracy. Nevertheless, what we heard was amazing. I mean, the 2-star AFSS agents remained quiet throughout Richardson's lecture, but their eyes scanned the room constantly. Though Richardson made himself accessible and never asked a question, nobody else did. Every airman was scared. See, I mean, he wrote it, I knew it. I wasn't even there, I knew it. We were told that our security clearances had been upgraded. I had a secret clearance at the time. In the event we talked about the UFO, we faced stiffer penalties for doing so. Now here's the thing. This event happened off base. It didn't happen on military soil, but they're treating it as if this is something that is considered top secret. And they're pretty much just saying, get on with your life. You will not talk about it. And it really didn't give any of them a chance to really understand what they had experienced, because this is so unusual. But immediately, right off the bat, it's like, if you talk about this, you're going to be in trouble. If you talk about this with anybody, your life here at Bentwaters is going to come to a halt really fast. And they didn't know this either. I mean, a lot of these young people were brand new. They didn't realize that the attrition from the people leaving the base really had nothing to do with drugs in many cases. It just had to do with many of the airmen were being railroaded out for one reason or another. They were being punished. And so the fact that they had them, they pretty much told them, look, you cannot talk about this, period. So after it's over and they go outside, and apparently still Larry has a need to call his mom and tell her what happened. I think, he probably wanted comfort to know he was okay, and that what had happened, because it's happened before in his life that he experienced some unusual things. So they were actually in the recreation center, which had a phone there that you could use, but they thought it'd be better to go to the public phones that were on base, and they would make the call there. They didn't realize either that those phones were tapped. And, it's funny because I use those phones many times calling home to talk to my mom, because I was either homesick or, wanted to talk. I never had much to talk about. I was mostly listening to what they had to say. But so he gets his mom on the phone and he starts sharing the information. And then all of a sudden the phone is disconnected. And they call the operator back, only to find out that it was disconnected by the communication, it was disconnected by the people working in the communications area on base. And so he did get in trouble. He had to pay a fine for that, and he was told to keep his mouth shut. So what I just find interesting about this is the fact that when George woke up, he had no idea what was going on. And the way the leadership took care of it is they shut everybody down completely. To the point that it was under duress that they were not to talk about something, not to talk about what they had experienced off base. And because there were many of them that were out there, that probably added more credibility, as opposed to, say, in February 1980, Rehfeldt saw UFO. And she was with one person, so you could corroborate it. However, it was just two of us, but it did fly over the base. So I was obligated as the lead patrol to report it. But I was so freaking beaten down from it that I didn't give a shit. There were a lot of things that happened that, you know, I just didn't give a shit. I really didn't. I wanted to be left alone. And they probably took that to their advantage, being marginalized anyway. What's the point of putting myself into more aggravation? The other thing he mentioned is that at one point, and it could have been a dream or not, that he goes to this underground facility, and behind this wall, he's actually he's talking through his mind to this being that is trying to tell him, you know, that you know, trying to tell him that he's, you know, that they know I'm from another world and I'm going to tell you about your life, and do you remember? So and that really reminded me of a few times when I was out on East Gate and middle of the night, and I could, in my head, I heard, and it was weird, it's this flash thing, a flash of a gray, this little person telling me, don't turn around because I don't want you to be scared. That's what he said, or she said. They just wanted to observe. I was like, okay, you can observe, just I didn't want to be scared. Then the second time it happened was when I was in the bomb dump at RAF Woodbridge, and I was heading out to do my building checks when, again, I had another flash in my mind, and this time it was a 7-foot tall praying mantis walking on 2 feet, very dark, very muscular. And he told me, don't go. I went right back to my gate check. I was not going to go. I had no desire to confront the praying mantis, 7-foot tall. So I think in some ways they were actually trying to help me not be afraid, which I have to say I appreciate. The problem that we have is also when you listen to many of the accounts that happened during the Rendlesham Forest Incident, is that people had different perceptions, different realities. What they saw was different from the guy standing right next to them. And, you know, I mean, it was a mind fuck, but it was everyone's different reality, which actually down the road made them all really angry at each other, because they're like, well, that's not what happened. And they're like, yeah, that is what happened. So, you know, and I thought to myself, that's really interesting that things like that, you know, whatever the sophisticated beings that were there, on and around the base were really clever and smart enough to know, or to use be able to bend our reality and be able to, mess around with our five senses. The funny thing is, though, is that I think with intuition, sometimes you've got more insight than those that just go by the facts of there's a tree in the woods. How many trees are there? What's the facts, as opposed to, what does your gut intuition say? So I just found it really fascinating, and I'm probably talking too much about it, but I really think that when you start looking at these layers, especially what George Conway went through, and then he didn't know, he was there during that time, and he says it quite a few times. I was there during that time, but no one talked about it. And he kind of got the gist a little bit, and then when he was taking General or Colonel Williams at the time, taking him to a fighter aircraft to take a thermos-like object and hand it over to the pilot and say, they were going to take it to Ramstein. So, you have these little bits, but when you really put the whole thing together, the people, not only did the Air Force, but the people at the base, the people that we were looking up to as our leaders, really were trying to go above and beyond to squelch it. Almost as if it's saying, well, if they pursue it, if Major Ziegler pursued it, if the colonels pursued it, it would not benefit anyone. And especially when you're looking at getting a promotion. And I think that just really sucked, just really, really sucked. And yeah.
This is February of 1980. My job was pretty much entry controller and working in law enforcement. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was just a clear night. I was on patrol at the time, just kind of, bored. All of a sudden we see this light approaching. It was coming from the area of the North Sea. We couldn't see the aircraft itself. It was moving in like a regular aircraft. And we looked over at the runway, waiting for the lights to go on. As it got closer and closer, it just stopped. It didn't make any noise. And it just moves up, down, left, right. The movement was very geometric. It was not a normal movement. It was very definitive. And that's where it split into 3 pieces. Those 3 pieces split off, and it took off and flew across the runway at a phenomenal speed, and then went straight up. And now we're stunned. We're like, what was that?